All right. I will go ahead and get started. Thanks, guys, for coming to my session. We will probably, the best way to do this is if you have a question, if you want to type in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and say, hey, Jessica, what about this? That would work best for me just because I like the interaction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So we're going to talk about collaboration in the inclusion classroom. That is important to me. I don't know where you are. Perhaps maybe you're in California, or you're like myself in Georgia, or I teach in Georgia, but I live in Alabama. And special ed, especially now with all of our lovely stuff going on, seems to be a big deal, way more than usual. And okay, California. I figured everybody might be from California just because, but or like in that area. So, but we will get started. All right. Okay, like I said, this is going to be collaboration in the inclusion classroom. We're going to talk about several different things about co-teaching and some other things. And oh, Melanie, you have a baby. Oh, my daughter's 3. I just got home and she was like, Mommy, you come play. And I was like, I have to go to a conference. I'll be right back. Precious. My daughter's sassy. I wish she wasn't so sassy. A 3-year-old too. Whew, girl, more power to you. I have 1. Okay. Anyway, like I said, my name is Jessica Reed. I have an EDS in instructional technology. I have a bachelor's from University of Kentucky in elementary education, a master's from the University of Alabama in collaborative co-teaching in the classroom. So I've done a little bit of everything. And this is my little Bitmoji sped tech teacher. And I'm a Google for Education certified trainer, but my personal favorite is I'm a Google for Education, or Google Workspace for Education, since they updated everything, certified innovator, which is if you ever have an opportunity, this would be a very cool thing to do. Being an innovator has probably been the greatest thing I've done professionally. All right, my Twitter is at Kentucky Girl in Alabama. Like I said, I'm a Kentucky graduate that lives in Alabama due to my husband. I teach 6th through 8th grade ELA resource. I love any and everything ed tech. I'm a Google innovator from the New York cohort. And like I mentioned, I'm Google for Education trainer. I apologize if you see me being paranoid. I had to have a bump removed from my face, and I look like I've got something going on my face, and I can see myself. Good times. But we will get started. So what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about what is inclusion. Excuse me. What's inclusion? What's collaboration? How to engage and communicate during remote learning and in the classroom. And then what resources are out there. And I can tell you everything that we're going to talk about are things that I've used myself. When I present, I like to talk about things that are things I've actually used, not just give you some kind of random BS, because we all know that typically can sometimes happen when you come to a conference. So everything I've done, I'm going to share with you. And hopefully you can just take something and use it Monday morning when you go back to school, whether it's virtually or not. All right, so collaboration, what is that? Collaboration is not a new concept in the classroom. You know, as we increase in technology and PBL, which is project-based learning type activities, students need to be able to work with one another to achieve a goal. I dealt with that this afternoon with my 8th graders. Because I'm resource, I have my kids for 3 years. I usually have them starting in 6th grade all the way up to 8th grade. And there are some of my 8th graders that they need to go into high school. Like, I'm done with them. I'm over their attitude. They're little turkeys. I'm over it. There's no saving it at this point. I mean, I will support them. I will do whatever I can for them, but their behaviors are just, I'm over it. I have students who are not going to work together, and I always am like, you have to work together. There's not an option. You can't go to a job and not work by yourself. There's no job where you are specifically by yourself all the time. There's just not. You're always going to have to rely on somebody. And so it's important that our kids understand how to collaborate with each other, especially for students who have a disability, because that can be a sensory disability, can be autism, can be a specific learning disability. I don't know perhaps what your terminology is where you are, but a lot of times when you have a student who is autistic, they may have some sensory deficits that other students may not be comfortable with. That is something that you have to work with them and get them acclimated to the classroom and get them to work with other kids. Sometimes we have really great kids who are willing to work with, who are awesome peer tutors or peer people. Sometimes you just have that mean kid. So we want everyone to understand that you can work with each other. You may not like each other, but you can work together. Collaboration works for everyone. My biggest thing, and you'll keep hearing this, is if a student, it doesn't matter if a student receives an accommodation or not. Every single student has a right to have a chance to build a relationship in the classroom and to have that understanding with their peers or that understanding with the teacher. Just because a kid has a label, if it's ELL, ESL, 504, which or an IEP, it doesn't matter. We are there as a teacher to help our students, not just academically, but socially, figure out this craziness that we are dealing with today. All right, so what's inclusion? Inclusion is a classroom that contains both general ed students and special ed students. It's a place that is pretty awesome when you really get to think about it, because it can lead, it's collaboration between two teachers or a teacher and a para. Can be awesome, which is why my little Bitmoji is jumping for joy with the heart, because anytime that you have a classroom with two people in it, you typically would think that your workload would be cut in half, because you have a content area specialist who would be, if you taught middle school, if I come into your classroom as a special ed teacher, if you're a language arts teacher or a math classroom, you're the math teacher, you know your math. I can't teach math. That's why I teach ELA. But as a special ed teacher, I've had the training to help come in and come up with different ways of accommodating my students, different ways of maybe teaching or modifying assignments to making it work for my students, because every student is able to show that they know something, even if it's not your typical written response. And we'll get more into that as we talk about different things that you can do. Typically students with special needs do not do well on tests. I don't perform well on tests. I did not make past 1,000 on my SAT. My ACT, I made a 21. I have 4 degrees. I also have another master's. Just because of one test is not going to determine what I can and can't do. And so inclusion is awesome because you have two people who know what they're doing, typically, and you can really make a great situation for some students. But now, as awesome as it can be, it can also not be so great. Inclusion is co-teaching and collaboration. Co-teaching is where, like I said before, there's two teachers in the classroom. You get to share the work. Imagine if a student clicks better with you than the other teacher and vice versa. So this would be something as simple as, maybe you made a connection with little Jimmy about Kentucky basketball compared to you have nothing in common with another student. Maybe your co-teacher has something in common with, little Brittany. There is a reason that you can make a connection to a kid. And sometimes when a kid knows that you have high expectations for them, they're going to perform that for you. Now, if they think the other teacher's not going to care about them, they may not. But if a student knows that you care and that both of you are caring, they will work for you. So it's kind of like, sometimes you have kids who have a better connection with their mom, or maybe a certain grandmother, grandfather, or even a cousin. It's just the same concept. The biggest thing with inclusion or co-teaching collaboration is going to be communication. And that is whether it's between student to teacher or teacher to teacher or teacher and para. We really have to be willing to talk and learn from each other to get any type of positive learning to happen. And that's really hard as adults because we don't like to think about how we may need to reflect or even rethink things. That means that you are not going and talking to your teacher bestie about so-and-so and how they made you mad. It's not about going to the principal and complaining. It's not going to Facebook. And you know people who do this. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, any type of social media, they post something and it's like a very ominous quote. And they're just like, oh, it's just the most worst day. And then you see below and it's people they're asking, they're seeking that attention. And then they get into their rant about so-and-so as a co-teacher. Well, that defeats the whole purpose of showing unity with your kids. You really, really have to be willing to talk and work together, which is so much easier said than done, especially if you get in a situation where you cannot work with the other person. But we have to be willing to reflect and even rethink how we teach sometimes, which is going to show our kids how you can change your process of thinking and how it can make it a better situation. So it's kind of like something that the kids get to see happening and then they can reflect upon it as well. All right, there are several co-teaching approaches and strategies. There's one teach, one support, parallel, station teaching, alternative teaching, and team teaching, and we're just going to briefly talk about those. One teach, I'll go back. One teach, one support is where you have one teacher at the board and the other is walking around helping the students. It is not where you have someone teaching and the other person is sitting in the back of the classroom on their computer. That's not co-teaching. That is you just being on your computer. Parallel teaching is where you're going to have both teachers teaching the same thing, maybe at the opposite ends of the room. Station teaching happens a lot in the elementary situation, classroom, because maybe you have 4 stations and the kids rotate between all 4 of you. And so you're working, if you're the special ed teacher, you're also working with the general ed teacher. All the kids are going to be your kids because your names are going to be on the test when they take them, whatever if your situation is. But with station teaching, maybe you're teaching one concept and your co-teacher's teaching the other. And then maybe one section is going to be like for individual review, and then maybe you have another section for enrichment, and then the kids kind of go between. Alternative teaching is going to be very similar. You're going to have one section where you're going to be teaching something, and then your co-teacher will be teaching the opposite, and then you swap. Team teaching is the most ideal situation for co-teaching, and that is where both teachers are teaching, and it's like you can walk into a classroom and you don't know who the main teacher is. Both teachers have a positive presence in the classroom, and there's never a struggle to see, never a power struggle, if that makes sense. All right, so co-teaching is really a marriage. It's not something everyone signs up for. It's more if your administrator places you in the classroom or then asks you like, hey, in the beginning of August, hey, do you mind sharing your room with so-and-so? I think you'd be a great co-teacher. Typically, you're just told you're going to do it. I do think that co-teaching is very similar to a marriage. You know, at the beginning of school, everything is great. Then by December, you want to file for divorce. I've been in that situation. How do we fix this? How does this affect the students? If this is something that interests you, I'm in the process of writing a book with EduMatch called The Collaborative Prenup, which is specifically talking about this. This type of thing does affect the students because if the students know that you two don't like each other, they're going to play you against each other. They're going to play you against other teachers. Their parents are going to play you. Like there's a whole, it just makes everything not great. The kids are your main priority. You know this. You're attending a conference on a Friday. The kids are your main priority, and that's what your main focus should be. All right, 6th way to make it work real quick. Rapport. You don't have to be best friends, but try to enjoy each other's presence. Teaching style. Everyone has their own different teaching style. The cool thing about co-teaching or collaborations, you get to use them and create your own teaching style together. You need to be able to discuss each other's strengths and weaknesses, and then figure out how you can complement each other in the classroom. Okay, thank you, Melanie. No problem. Completely understand. Work together, take risks, think outside the box when it comes to lessons and activities, and then be successful in the classroom. You have to talk with each other. All right, so what about the gifted students, or who students are considered twice exceptional? You want to have the students explore topics on a deeper level rather than initial surface knowledge. Have the students use coding for subjects like ELA or math. This could lead to potential jobs in the future. Have the students create a magazine. Have the students create short films, or maybe even using video. And then Google Sites and podcasts to share thoughts and ideas. Technology can be used to increase engagement if it's used meaningfully. All right. Why Google and Google Classroom? In my school district, we use Google Suite and Google Classroom. So that's what I'm most comfortable sharing about. All right, so Google Classroom with a co-teacher, let's just get into it. If you set up your Google Classroom with a co-teacher for inclusion or push-in model, each teacher is able to be responsible for different activities, including or updating the calendar to create assignments. Each teacher will have access to all work the students will complete, which then allows both teachers to see how the student may be progressing in the class, or where there may be some difficulties depending on your situation. All right, how do we do this? So some cool ideas. Google Classroom is a great place to serve as a hub for all the student work. Like I said, there's several ways to use it. Just make sure both teachers are considered co-teachers, and that way everyone has access to it. Google Sites, you can have a student create a site together to promote a project or a business. This is really cool if you are working with a collaborative effort, maybe between math and ELA and social studies, and everybody's working together on an economic project. And the kids are able to come up with a site where they have to write copy, they shoot pictures, they create a commercial to show an invention or a service they want to offer. Sites is something that can teach the students how to create something on the web that may be a potential job skill, which will benefit them in the future. And that is something that we want our kids to do. And you can also use Google Slides as a way to have study guides or notes for different assignments. Google Calendar, you can keep things organized, like who does what, etc. You can have IP meetings and more, just depending on what you want to do. It's just an easy way to keep things very organized. Oh, excuse me. All right, Wakelet, if you haven't caught the wave, Wakelet is a very cool way to capture and organize different types of multimedia resources for everyone. To me, it is like Pinterest, but for teachers on steroids. It's got some very cool things. You can collect a board maybe with your grade level of different resources for a topic and have your Wakelet, and it'll all be right there. So just a cool way to keep some things together. Screencastify, especially now with the Zoom, with the different recording options that we have for virtual, it is a awesome extension, allows you to record in many different ways. There's a paid and a free version. I personally prefer the paid version because I've used it for so long. There's Loom, there's Screencast-O-Matic. There's so many different options. You just need to choose what you feel most comfortable with. Kahoot or GymKit, these are both really great review games. They're fun and engaging. You can have a free version or do the paid version. GymKit is really fun, especially during Halloween. I love Edgar Allan Poe, and so we do an Edgar Allan Poe review for GymKit. And what's cool about it is that you have zombies versus humans, and so the kids get to team up against each other, and they get to do money, they play money, and all these kind of cool things. So I like GymKit for review. Kahoot, I would use a word of caution, because if you have a student who maybe, I know, thank you. GymKit is free. Yes, there is a free version, and then there's a paid version. So you could definitely use the free version, which is what I have done myself. A lot of those things I don't pay for because I don't, sometimes that extra $25 can go for something else. So Kahoot, like I was saying, you can use it for review games. I would have a word of caution, because if you have a student who is going to fixate on something, that may not be something that you want to continuously use all the time. Kahoot, just like anything else, is going to be something that you want to use sparingly, so that the kids don't get completely used to it and it's still kind of fun and exciting for them. All right, if you think nothing else from me, and I hope you have used this Flipgrid. A Flipgrid is a great way to collaborate. Flipgrid is a great way to get student responses for assignments. You know, I have students who struggle with writing. It's like if they verbally can tell me something, then they're doing really great. But it's like when they get the pen, you know, the pen to the paper, it gets lost in translation. And so Flipgrid is really great because it's a safe space and you can have the students record responses. They get to take cool pictures, you know, do a selfie, do like different backgrounds, stickers. Kids really get into it. It's free. It is run by Microsoft. I believe Microsoft bought Flipgrid. It's free. I don't know how else to say. Flipgrid is awesome. You definitely need to try it. Nearpod and Pear Deck are both very similar. Some people prefer one over the other. They're just a fun and engaging way to present lessons in a class or self-paced work time. My school district has a Nearpod subscription, and I love Nearpod. I'm a Nearpod pioneer. Nearpod, a lot of the things that you want to be able to do, you do have to have a paid version, such as virtual field trips, time to climb review game, and things. Pear Deck, the Nearpod and Pear Deck both have an option that you can do in Google Slides. The Nearpod is not going to work for you unless you have a subscription to Nearpod. I will tell you one really cool thing to do is if you click on this link, the Nearpod free board, it's a collaborative board, or even just type in Google Nearpod free collaborative board. It's going to be very similar to Padlet, which is going to be like, you know, your big sheet of paper where you can put Post-it notes and you can control what the kids write because you can improve it. It's something that's free. You can just pop it in there. You don't even have to have a Nearpod account. Just free, easy to get. I love any way that I can get a quick assessment or quick knowledge that my kids understand. And I can use that as a, especially with IEPs, we have to be able to show the data. And that's one really cool way to do. Nearpod and Pear Deck are, they like when one comes out with one option, all of a sudden the other one comes out with the other. Pear Deck recently, about a month or so ago, came out with co-teaching options. Nearpod is about to come out with in March the same. So co-teaching, which if you are collaborating in a class, is very cool. It's just going to be a great way to do things. So it's just whichever one you prefer. Google Keep. Google Keep's just a fun and easy way to keep things organized. It reminds me of being in having, you know, your refrigerator or even just a notepad on the wall. I will tell you, we have used Google Keep recently with a student to have them keep things organized, and that way everyone kind of like not a behavior chart necessarily, but as a way to have the student be more responsible for himself and his actions and the things that are going on in his classroom, but the teacher is able to kind of help guide that. Google Keep is cool because you can mark things off, but it doesn't disappear and everybody can have access to it, and we have a Google account. So it's just one way that we are trying to collaborate with this student to help him build his resources and a little bit of his confidence, because he is struggling somewhat in the classroom. So, and it's also nice because when you get to middle school, you don't want to carry around a behavior chart. You know, you just don't, or necessarily an agenda if you have a you know, a Chromebook, if you can use the Chromebook at the point, but it's just one way that the kids are able to kind of be in control of their own learning, which is going to help us in the end. All right, Slotsmania, if you've never used Slotsmania, you need to check her out. Paula is an awesome website with free templates. She is updating it all the time with Google Slides and PowerPoint. There are so many cool things. This is I don't think this one is, but usually my PowerPoints or my presentations are going to be from Slides because there's so many cool things. There are interactive notebooks. So if you are a science teacher and you want to have an interactive notebook, but you want it on the Chromebook, there you go. You just have to save it, make a copy, save it, and then share it with your kids so everyone has a copy. You can do agendas that way, way more. A friend of mine, we actually do our PD for our school, and we have done a Slides notebook where it's an interactive notebook for professional development that everyone is expected to do. When they finish, they use a Google form, fill it out, and let us know that they're completed. And that way we can go back and check it. It's free. You cannot beat free. Free is awesome, especially now being a teacher and, not having any money when it's February. So love some free. Please, please, please check her out. And make sure you always want to give credit to her or whoever created the slideshow, because that's one way that they can continue to grow. Google Slides, going right into Google Slides. One of my absolute favorite projects I get to do with my kids is we study Edgar Allan Poe, and we start in 6th grade, and when we get to 8th grade, like I said, because I have my kids every year, it's awesome because my kids know Edgar Allan Poe. We go way in depth. We talk about how he was raised, how he lost everyone he loved, and how that affected his writing. How did that affect the Telltale Heart? Edgar Allan Poe was if you think about it, was a very weird man. How did the things that happened in his life affect his writing? It's very telltale of it. I didn't realize that would be a pun, but it was. What I do is the kids as a ending project instead of a test, because like I said, my kids don't test well. I have a poem where I take a share deck and I have the poem, The Telltale Heart, and I have different stanzas. And each student is required, so depending on the number of kids I have, is required for 1 to 3 slides based on the topic. So based off of the stanza, the kid, and you can do this with any subject, but the kid would have the stanza, and then on the side, they would be able to tell me what they thought in today's words, what that stanza meant. And then they decorated the stanza. They could add sound effects, any of that kind of cool stuff to make the stanza their own. And they're responsible for their own stanza. And then on the bottom where it said like the speaker notes, they would have to kind of give me their thoughts on why they thought his writing his life made such a big difference in his writing. And I will tell you, this is not something that my kids automatically knew how to do. This is something we had to practice, because a lot of times when you have your kids, and we'll go on this in just a second, Google Docs, when you have your kids working with each other, they want to delete and they want to get rid of things and they want to be like really funny. And it's actually very aggravating. So this is one way that we're practicing being good collaborators by keeping to ourselves. You can always add things back based off of the editing, but it's just a good teachable moment. And I love doing that. It's one of my absolute favorite things to do. And we always do Edgar Allan Poe during Halloween, during the month of October. All right, so Google Docs. This is, like I mentioned before, something you may have to teach your students. Students can create essays and they're able to edit each other's works by creating comments and providing authentic information or responses. It is important for you to know that you can do all of these things remotely. Or if you're in a classroom, one of my favorite things to do with Google Docs is when I have a student who, for some reason, some of my 6th graders seem to think that we don't have to capitalize our name, because I don't know why. If I could answer that would be a millionaire, I think, at this point. But with my kids, I will pop on my Chromebook and I'll type a message, and you just see their head pop up over their Chromebook, like, what are you doing? Like, Miss Reed, that's mine. Well, I need you to do this. It kind of gives them a chance for them to understand that there's someone working with them, and I'm just trying to help, and it kind of builds that trust, and being able to provide comments and such, et cetera, et cetera. So students can also work on work problems if you're a math teacher or even a science teacher, having the kids work on work problems in groups, and then even at home with you, responding back and providing feedback and thoughts, and vice versa. So, peer editing is a good way for the kids to work together, collaborate, to share thoughts in a constructive manner, rather than just being like, that sucks, which kids can typically say, but we don't want them to. All right, Google Sheets. You can have students organize and collaborate on many things. This can also be great for activities for inclusion as well. If you're co-teaching, maybe you guys are going to have a Google sheet where you have list your entire year out with all your standards, who's going to do what, who covers what, and you have it all organized. As a special ed teacher, I'm our lead special ed teacher at the middle school, and so I have a massive Google sheet that has every single person's name with their caseload, every single kid from 6th through 8th grade, who has what accommodations. I mean, you name it, it's on this sheet of paper. And it's been really beneficial because everyone who needs to have access to it has access to it. And I had to we have our 8th graders coming up next week are going to start registering for high school. And so I just was able to copy and paste from everyone's paper into another Google sheet to share with our high school special ed lead teacher, so that she would know who has what type of classes. It's all in one place instead of me looking 800 different places. So it's just a really cool way to be organized. You could do the same thing with your kids. Also with Google Sheets. I wish I would have learned how to use Excel when I was younger. You can learn how to create tables, graphs, use accounting things. There's so many different things that you can do. You just need to play around with it. Google Forms, this is just an awesome way to get feedback from your students. If you have a student who is very quiet, if you provide them an opportunity to provide you with authentic information, they're going to, especially if they feel like they're not going to be judged because they're not having to be in front of people. This is one way. And then it shows your students that you're able to take feedback yourself and reflect and change. So Google Meets and Zoom, we are using Zoom. There's a whole bunch of new things coming to Google Meet. There's a whole bunch of upgrades to Zoom. This is the way a lot of our classes are now. This is the way a lot of conferences are. It's a good thing to use. I just really liked Google Meet or Zoom back in the spring because I actually got to see my kids. That was the hardest thing to me about the pandemic, was missing my kids. I've not been a virtual teacher. I teach every single day in my classroom with my kids. So I have been face-to-face this entire time. All right, 5 ways to avoid disasters with Google things. You need to make sure that you color code on docs. Make sure to share one folder for collecting work and allowing everyone to have access. Using the revision history, have tables with collaborations. It just helps organize things. And then both teachers and students can use the comment feature and all. Kind of what I talked about before. If you've never checked out the techieteacher.net, she's a great resource. She's got a ton of cool things to check out. All right, now that we've learned so much more tips, how to really make the most of a co-teaching partnership, Cult of Pedagogy is awesome. If you can ever hear her speak, I believe she is speaking at the spring CUE, and she's amazing to listen to. Her name is Jennifer Gonzalez, and she has a podcast. You need to check her out. Just respect each other, have the defined roles and responsibilities, be flexible, plan together. Don't take yourself too seriously. We're teachers. We're here to not just, talk about one thing with our kids. We're there for a lot more. Communicate and seek administrative support when appropriate. You don't necessarily need to go run to your principal every time something happens, but when it is important, that's when you need to seek it. All right, here's just some great technology resources. Practice.learningaccelerator.org. Dish Out Textbook by Matt Miller is fantastic. Cult of Pedagogy, like I just talked about. Storyboardthat.com. Lindsay and Learning, if you want to know some more ideas for Google Forms in the ELA classroom. Hello Teacher Lady, if you want to create a virtual Bitmoji scene. Google Tools for English language learners. This is Eric Curtis. He has so many Google videos that you need to check them out. If you ever have a question about anything Google, this is the website to go to. And then Reading Rockets is just a great ELA resource that has many different things to do and suggestions for all different grade levels. And then a friend of mine, Nadine Gilkinson, created this Accessibility for All, which talks about using read and write in the classroom. If you don't know what read and write is a extension that you can get on your Chromebook that will help the students have something read to them. I know the Chromebook will read to you now, but this was an option before where there's some free, it's a free and a paid version. but the free version would read everything to you. A lot of times when a student has a disability, they have testing accommodations, and one of the accommodations may be question and answers right to you. In the state of Georgia, you cannot have the passage right to you unless you can prove that you need it. So you can have the questions and answers right to you for your students. All right, co-teaching resources. These are just some different things. You can check it out. You can click on the link. Co-teaching and collaboration is just very important. And it's going to be something that continues to happen in the classroom because our classroom is full of very different kids than what we originally would think. This is my website, sites.google.com, SpedTech Teacher. It's just full of different ideas and blog posts. I would love to connect with you. My Twitter is @KentuckyGirl, and my email is jessicareed996@gmail.com. You have a copy of this. I made it where it's forced you to make a copy. That way you would actually be able to just delete or share things that you would like. Check me out and connect with me. I would love to talk to you. And that is it. So I told you it was kind of wham bam. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate for you all saying the ones that did, because I know some people left, which is okay. But if you all have any questions, this would be the time. I'd be more than happy to talk. And I appreciate you smiling, Sarah, because I can see your face.
It's so funny because I just got off a class with students where they were all, with their names up. And I'm like, are you guys listening to me or are you playing Minecraft? It's all
I always hate these conferences because you get so excited when I had one conference where I started off with like 20 something people, and by the time it was over, I had like 7. I was like, was that boring?
I have to apologize because I missed the beginning where you explained what your role is.
I am a middle school special ed teacher, and I teach ELA resource 6 through 8. So I basically do the standards, the Georgia standards, but I kind of do it in a more, I have to teach a lot of prerequisite skills before I can go. Like if we talk about the plot diagram, my 6th graders are still talking about beginning, middle, and end. Like we don't really go into that depth. You know what I mean? Like we still have a little bit to climb before we can get to a plot diagram. But I also do a lot of ed tech stuff I'm in a very small district, so I do a lot of stuff for my district ed tech wise.
Got it. Miss Host, is it okay that I'm asking questions at this time?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I've actually always worked in independent schools and more college prep type environment, and I've always worked with middle and upper school students, and we're really venturing into the land of having learning specialists and supporting students with learning accommodations, and it's changed quite a bit in like the last probably 7 or 8 years. And we now actually, my library study rooms were taken for our learning specialists. But I'm really appreciate your talk because I'm really turning my head around where we're all here to support students with different types of learning abilities, and it's really been nice to grow in that area. So
it's one of those things. I am this year, because I'm an overachiever, I have decided in Georgia you can take endorsements. It kind of just allows you to teach different options besides rather than just taking the test. And I am taking a dyslexia endorsement because dyslexia is not considered a one of our special ed labels yet. I think it's on the way to become that way. And I'm also taking gifted. My husband thinks I'm insane. But but like I'm learning so much to where just in case I ever have a student who is twice exceptional, because it's going to happen.
Right.
I haven't had one in a very long time, or students who are dyslexic. Like I have a 7th grader who he can't recognize his own name sometimes. So like you're in your mind, you're like, how did they pass? Like, how did they move on to that grade? But they're in my room, which is, I'm there to help, but it's hard because I'm going, they didn't teach me this in school. There is nothing, well, and you know this, I mean, nothing you learn in the real classroom is what you got taught in school. My first day of teaching, I taught kindergarten. I was the 3rd teacher they had. Girl, I had somebody done climb up the wall like they Spider-Man the door frame.
That's so funny. Do you have library media specialists in your current school?
We do, and she's actually one of my best friends. That's what I was telling our lovely host. She is fantastic. She was a former English teacher, and she is my right-hand person when we do professional development. So she just doesn't like getting in front of people as much as I don't mind. But our media specialist, unfortunately, she just does more of like internet, like you can have her come like research and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But it's been very weird this year because of the COVID.
Right. Are there other ways you guys have increased your partnership together? Because I wouldn't say our learning specialists, I'm a little disappointed. Our two learning specialists, luckily we have a new one who seems really collaborative, but they didn't necessarily bring one of them in to sort of like develop a program. So it's more like they're providing services to their students, but it's not really like it's not like a marketed visionary program.
So as a learning specialist, is that someone who's like would be like a special ed teacher, or is that someone who would just be like a regular teacher
Yeah,
who
we don't
helps?
really have, we don't have special ed, but instead it would be students who had tested for accommodations and needed extra support, extra assistance. So maybe it's a different model.
A little bit, yeah. Well, because when they come to me, I mean, you know what an IEP is, it's an individual education, like that's a legal document, so they have the right
Have to have the services.
And we got some mamas who are gonna pull that if they don't get them, which is fine because I'm that mama with my 3-year-old. But we have had a good partnership because anytime I've like have a question or something where how can I increase my like with the kids, like if they're struggling with this, what would be a good option like for book wise? You know, how do I increase their reading rather than like just reading, you know, Big Nate show or whatever. How can I increase my students? Like, how do I get them to go beyond a fiction book? What's a good nonfiction? Like that kind of partnership we have. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
No, it just helps. And it's true. Like in the end, a lot of it is just that the school environments are very different. Again, I'm like in a school environment where we're just kind of starting to realize that students have differences. So I'm glad we're making that stride, and I'm looking forward to figuring out ways that the library can support that.
Are you a charter school?
No, it's a private, like a private.
Okay, private. That's what you were saying. Okay.
School. So with teachers who think they're very, very special.
I teach public, so we like to think we are, but it can be different than that.
No, it's interesting.
No, it was funny.
Yeah. So anyways, well, I so appreciate this and just good to hear about some.
If you like I said, like I've been telling everybody, if you follow me on Twitter, I'll follow you back, and that way if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, or you have any of my information. I'd be more than happy to talk to you.
Great.
Like this is what
are you all fully back in session? Is anybody back in session? We're just getting back.
We are. We had a weather day yesterday, but we are completely, well, not like we still have some kids who are doing virtual learning, but we haven't done the hybrid. We have been face to face this entire time. Yeah. And COVID sucks. I've had COVID. I'm getting over it.
From the students or from?
No, we actually, I believe my mother-in-law brought it into our house.
Well, I'm glad you're healthy. That's really just what you need. That's what you need with a 3-year-old. Oh my God.
Yeah, everyone had it, but she did not. And so she was right with me. And then last weekend I had a stomach bug. So I'm doing real good. I lost a little bit of weight. So hey, that's pretty positive, I guess, at this point.
I know it's really sad as a working mom that you possibly dream about COVID because you're thinking, wow, I could get 2 weeks alone in my bedroom. Sorry, that's really sad.
Well, it's one of those, and everybody's up to their own. Like if you want to have the shot or not, that's totally up to you. But I'm getting the shot in April. I'm super excited because I'm like, I would not want COVID again. Like
I've heard